The moon of Xylaris hung low in the sky, casting a faint blue glow over the jagged landscape below. A thick mist swirled across the desolate plains, obscuring the silhouettes of alien ruins, long forgotten by time but still radiating a dark energy that seemed to hum beneath the surface. The air crackled with the low vibration of strange electromagnetic fields, making every movement feel sluggish, like the world itself was holding its breath. In the distance, a faintly glowing fortress loomed. Hawker's Bastion, a fortress said to be impenetrable, built from the bones of a long-dead, ancient species. It was here that the alien faction known as the Drelli had made their last stand, only to be overtaken by a new breed of conquerors, more ruthless, more cunning, and more technologically advanced. But the Drelli weren't the ones Kaelin was after. She lay hidden behind a crumbling pillar, her breath shallow, her body aching from the poison coursing through her veins. The Zalorians, with their glistening, toxic bioluminescence, had ambushed her during a reconnaissance mission, injecting her with a slow-acting venom that paralyzed both mind and body. The poison was unlike anything she'd encountered before, leaving her weak but alive, just enough to keep her conscious as her enemies believed her to be dead. Now, as the Zalorian camp loomed just a few hundred yards away, Kaelin gritted her teeth. The poison still lingered, but she wasn't done. She had been trained for this. Survival was her instinct. The faint hum of alien ships could be heard in the distance, their engines purring as they soared over the barren landscape. In the shadows of their craft, Kaelin could see the Zalorian patrols, unknowingly closing in on the spot where she lay. Her vision blurred, her hands trembling, but her mind sharpened. This was her chance. They thought she was weak, vulnerable, easy prey, but the poison hadn't broken her. It had only given her time to plan. Kaelin's lips curled into a tight smile as she reached for the hidden nanite injector in her boot. With a sharp inhale, she injected herself, feeling the rush of synthetic adrenaline surge through her. Her muscles repaired, her mind cleared, and the poison began to fade away, like an invisible weight lifting from her shoulders. As she stood, poised and ready, the last thing she remembered was the smug faces of the Zalorian commanders. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken her. But she had other plans. The hunt was on. Kaelin Voss didn't quite look like someone who belonged on an alien battlefield. While the Zalorian soldiers around her polished their exotic weaponry, their muscles rippling with otherworldly intensity, Kaelin stood at the edge of the camp in nothing more than standard-issue Earth combat fatigues, worn, slightly faded and unremarkable. She hadn't spent hours meditating or tuning her combat instincts like the rest of them. Instead, she was lounging against a crumbling alien pillar, scrolling through her hollow pad, looking for the next funny meme to send to her squad. The Zalorians, with their glowing skin and multifaceted eyes, regarded her with an air of bemusement, their disdain apparent. They were beastly, sleek, and highly trained in every form of alien warfare known to the galaxy. Meanwhile, Kaelin was just human. Her body wasn't built for the same kind of brutal, bio-enhanced combat their species excelled at. She stood at just over 5 feet tall, her blonde hair cut short and practical. But it was her attitude, her utter lack of awe in the face of these superior beings, that stood out the most. While others were priming their energy shields and discussing tactics in alien tongues, Kaelin grinned, snapping a quick selfie with the alien ruins behind her. She sent off a message. If I survive this, I'm going to need vacation. Her comrades had warned her that the Zalorian forces were no joke. But Kaelin wasn't worried. To her, the stakes weren't life or death. They were just another mission. And as far as she was concerned, she was going to outlast them all, just like every other impossible situation she'd found herself in. The aliens thought she was out of her depth, thought she was no match for their superior technology, their centuries of combat experience. But Kaelin had something they didn't. She had a human drive, an unpredictable streak of ingenuity that they hadn't learned to account for. While the others trained for years, Kaelin took every challenge in stride. She approached it with an easy confidence, a casual attitude, and a quiet determination that had always gotten her out of tight spots. And if she had to nap off a little poison along the way, well, that was just part of the plan. The Zalorian encampment sprawled out before Kaelin, a mixture of sleek alien technology and towering structures that looked like something straight out of a nightmare. Warships hung in the sky, their engines humming with an otherworldly power, while the alien soldiers moved with perfect precision, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon for threats. They had wiped out entire species without breaking a sweat. At the heart of the camp stood Commander Zalthara, a being of pure, terrifying focus, the embodiment of everything Kalen was up against. The Zalorians prided themselves on their traditions, their code of military superiority passed down through millennia. Zalthara was the pinnacle of that code, a commander revered throughout the galaxy for their unbeaten record and relentless tactics. Zalthara wasn't just any leader, they were the leader. They led the Zalorian forces through dozens of wars and were feared for their infallible strategies. No one, no being, had ever dared challenge them and lived to tell the tale. Kalen, on the other hand, was just one human soldier, a species of Zalorians considered little more than expendable ants. She wasn't supposed to be here, let alone survive this long. The odds were so overwhelmingly stacked against her that even her own commanders had written her off after the poison attack. They believed she was nothing more than bait for the Zalorians to toy with. But what the Zalorians didn't know was that Kalen had an advantage they couldn't even begin to comprehend. She wasn't bound by centuries of tradition or tactics. She wasn't weighed down by their rules or history. She had the raw instinct of a human soldier and the ability to think on her feet in ways they never could. Zalthara's forces were poised to crush what little resistance the human forces had left. The poison they'd injected her would have been part of the plan. Trap her, break her. The Zalorians thought they had won. But Kalen wasn't done yet. She had something that no Zalorian commander could account for. The will to survive, and a deadly plan that would turn their carefully laid traps into their worst nightmare. The stage was set. The Zalorian horde and their legendary commander would never see her coming. Kalen wasn't here to fight for survival. She was here to destroy them. While the Zalorian soldiers meditated in quiet, regimented circles, Kalen was sitting off to the side, one boot on a crumbling alien column. Sipping from a vintage thermos she'd scavenged from an old Earth supply crate. The sound of her faintly sizzling coffee filled the tense silence of the camp, a stark contrast to the soundless precision of the alien troops. In the distance, Zalthara oversaw the preparations for the attack, his face a mask of stoic focus. But Kalen wasn't concerned. The battle plans she'd overheard were all well and good, highly organized and precise, but she wasn't following any of it. She was too busy scrolling through a list of top 10 alien species you won't believe exist on her holopad. "You sure you're ready for this?" one of the nearby human soldiers asked, glancing nervously at the surrounding alien forces. Kalen didn't even look up from her screen. "Oh, totally," she said, sipping her coffee like she was on vacation rather than the verge of imminent combat. "But you might want to check your weapons. Just a suggestion." The soldier blinked. I have my rifle fully charged." Good, Kalen interrupted, flashing him a casual smile. "But is it? I don't know if the Zalorians will give you time to double-check." Nearby, an elite Zalorian soldier, one of their highest-ranking scouts, stopped in her tracks, her multifaceted eyes locking onto Kalen's relaxed posture, her head tilted, confusion rippling across her alien features. She glanced over at another soldier and whispered, "Why is she so relaxed?" The second soldier gave a half-shrug. "No idea. She's human. Just not what we expected." Kalen caught the conversation. She smirked and waved, offering an exaggerated thumbs up. "Hey there, folks. Don't mind me. Just getting in the zone for the mass destruction part. Hope you're all ready. Though, this is going to be a fun one." The Zalorian soldiers exchanged baffled looks. They had spent hours in the prep room, practicing their combat forms with perfect precision. They'd honed their energy shields and perfected their strategies. And here was this human, lounging with a thermos in one hand, making quips like she was gearing up for a picnic. "Don't take her lightly," whispered another soldier. "She could be a trick." Kalen glanced over, catching their eye with a mischievous grin. "Oh, definitely. I'm totally a trick. You should see what I can do with a paperclip and some duct tape." The soldiers stared at her, uncomprehending. Meanwhile, Kalen opened her pack and retrieved a spiked energy grenade. She casually tossed it into the air, catching it with one hand, and grinned. "You guys make it way too easy. The trick's always in the details, right?" She turned to prepare herself for the chaos that was about to unfold. Her nonchalance, that peculiar, casual confidence, left the Zalorians even more unsettled. What kind of soldier was this? No one in the galaxy had ever seen anything like it before. But Kaelin wasn't about to stop. Not until she wiped them out and had a decent meal afterwards. The first match was against a Tkor, a towering beast of a creature with exoskeletal armor and multiple pairs of glowing eyes. The Tkor had an insane strength, able to rip through solid steel with ease, and a predatory instinct that made it nearly impossible to surprise. Its strategy was simple: charge, crush, win. While the Tkor cracked its knuckles, readying itself for the inevitable bloodbath, Kaelin stood casual at the edge of the arena, adjusting her helmet and running a quick sweep on her weapon systems. The Zalorian officials watching her had assumed she'd go for a traditional approach, using stealth or precise combat tactics to outmaneuver the brute. Instead, Kaelin raised her hand and called out with an unapologetic grin. "Hey, you guys got any snacks around here? I'm starving." The Tkor roared, its fury echoing across the arena, but Kaelin didn't flinch. She simply took a moment to stretch as if preparing for a jog, then shook her head, muttering to herself, "Why is it always the big ones who think they can just charge in?" The creature lunged. With one fluid motion, Kaelin ducked, rolling under the Tkor's charging fist. She pulled out a small glowing energy dart from her utility belt, but instead of aiming it directly at the creature's exposed joints, she fired it to a cracked pillar in the corner of the arena. The explosion wasn't huge, but it was enough to disorient the Tkor with a massive flash of light and a cloud of debris. For a brief moment, the Tkor hesitated, clearly confused by the unpredictable tactic. Pro tip: always aim for the environment, not just the enemy, Kaelin shouted, her voice oddly casual. She threw another dart, this one hitting the Tkor's knee joint. The creature staggered, and for a moment, its massive form wobbled like a drunken giant. Instead of capitalizing on its vulnerability, Kaelin took a deep breath and stretched her legs again. The crowd was growing restless, muttering among themselves. "This human's approach is unorthodox," one of the Zalorian judges whispered. Finally, Kaelin moved in, using a combination of tactical rolls and light, nimble footwork that no one would have expected from a soldier with her build. With a swift kick to the Tkor's back, Kaelin sent it tumbling forward, and before it could rise, she was already sliding out of the way, letting the beast's momentum send it careening into a stone wall. "And that's how you do it, big guy," she quipped, wiping off a non-existent speck of dust from her shoulder. The Tkor lay unconscious, and Kaelin casually turned toward the judges, raising her hand for a victory salute. The crowd erupted into stunned silence. Nobody had ever seen anyone defeat a Tkor like that. The Zalorians were accustomed to spectacle, but this was something else entirely. The next match was against Zarkar, a shapeshifter capable of turning into a perfect mimic of anyone or anything around them. Zarkar had the ability to adapt instantly to any combat strategy, countering moves with alarming precision. But Kaelin wasn't concerned. The shapeshifter began by mimicking her movements, copying her stance with flawless imitation. "Nice trick," Kaelin called out, offering the creature an approving nod. "But you're a little too predictable, don't you think?" Zarkar's form shifted again, this time adopting the shape of a Zalorian warrior. Kaelin rolled her eyes. "Okay, enough with the theatrics," she muttered as she tossed a hollow decoy grenade on the ground. As Zarkar moved to engage, Kaelin quickly switched places with the decoy, leaving the creature to strike at thin air. Before Zarkar could figure out what happened, Kaelin activated the disruptor field on her combat boots, sending out a sonic wave that disrupted the shapeshifter's mimicry. Zarkar was forced to shift back to its original form, vulnerable for just a second. Kaelin didn't waste the opportunity. With a well-timed shot, she struck Zarkar's core processor, causing the creature to stumble. "Here's the thing, buddy," Kaelin said as she casually approached. "You can mimic all you want, but you can't mimic human ingenuity." Zarkar collapsed, its form flickering back to its original shape. The crowd was again stunned into silence. The Zalorian commanders at the edge of the arena whispered amongst themselves. Kaelin's ability to overcome such powerful, skilled opponents with absurd simplicity and unexpected tactics was proving to be a deadly combination. The Zalorians had written her off as a joke, but now they were beginning to realize the human was playing a different game entirely, and they had no idea how to stop it. Commander Zalthara paced back and forth in the cold, dimly lit chamber, staring at the holographic projection of Kalen's recent victories. Every move, every unexpected twist in the human strategy, made his scales tighten with irritation. He had seen countless combatants in his long career, warriors from every corner of the galaxy, each one bringing their own unique style to the arena. Yet nothing had prepared him for this. The Tkor had fallen easily, a brute of strength outsmarted by Kalen's seemingly careless tactics. Zarkar, the master of mimicry, had been undone by a trick so simple it bordered on the ridiculous. Zalthara had spent centuries perfecting his understanding of combat. Every evasive maneuver, every countermeasure, every form of attack. Yet this human, she wasn't playing by any of the rules he knew. He activated another recording, watching Kalen's unorthodox movements in silence. How could someone with such little training be so effective? There was no pattern to her style, no discipline, no structure. The humans were supposed to be a primitive species, incapable of competing in the refined world of galactic war. Zalthara stopped pacing and stared at the image of the human on the screen. A flicker of frustration crossed his face as he watched her casual, almost reckless demeanor, her relaxed posture, her offhand remarks, her incredibly audacious tactics. She didn't even seem to understand what was at stake here. Every moment of the match was treated like a game, yet she kept winning. Unbelievable, Zalthara muttered under his breath, his clawed hands clenching around the edge of the table. This human is breaking the game. He activated a different holofile, bringing up footage of the ancient Zalorian texts on combat tradition. Thousands of years of strategy, every move calculated perfection, every warrior trained in the old ways, the way of strength, precision, and honor. He had followed these codes for his entire life. His soldiers did the same. This was the essence of Zalorian power, of their superiority. And now this human, this insignificant creature, was shattering it all with the most unpredictable and unconventional methods imaginable. Zalthara leaned closer to the hologram, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. There was no honor in Kalen's methods, no technique. She was defying everything he believed in. The pride of his race, the history of his people, it all hinged on their adherence to tradition, the honor of the fight, to win through intelligence rather than brute force, to outwit the enemy rather than overpower them. It was an insult to everything he stood for. He had witnessed the human's strange tactics before, but seeing them in action, truly seeing them, was something entirely different. Kalen's methods were alien to him, and that made her dangerous in ways he had not prepared for. She was not bound by tradition. She did not care for the sacred codes of battle. She was simply doing whatever worked. In his long life, Zalthara had always relied on the certainty of his strategies, the guarantee that the rules would be followed, that the best would always win. But Kalen wasn't interested in following the rules. She was interested in destroying the status quo. And as he watched the final moment of her last match, her unapologetic grin as she defeated yet another opponent in the most unexpected way, Zalthara felt a cold chill ripple through his spine. For the first time in centuries, he felt a growing unease. She was breaking the game, and Zalthara wasn't sure if he could stop her. "This human isn't a threat because of her strength or her skills," he whispered, voice tinged with disbelief. "She's a threat because she's rewriting the rules." Commander Zalthara paced back and forth in the cold, dimly lit chamber, staring at the holographic projection of Kalen's recent victories. Every move, every unexpected twist in the human strategy, made his scales tighten with irritation. He had seen countless combatants in his long career, warriors from every corner of the galaxy, each one bringing their own unique style to the arena. Yet nothing had prepared him for this. The Tkor had fallen easily, a brute of strength outsmarted by Kalen's seemingly careless tactics. Zarkar, the master of mimicry, had been undone by a trick so simple it bordered on the ridiculous. Zalthara had spent centuries perfecting his understanding of combat. Every evasive maneuver, every countermeasure, every form of attack. Yet this human, she wasn't playing by any of the rules he knew. He activated another recording, watching Kalen's unorthodox movements in silence. How could someone with such little training be so effective? There was no pattern to her style, no discipline, no structure. The humans were supposed to be a primitive species, incapable of competing in the refined world of galactic war. Zalthara stopped pacing and stared at the image of the human on the screen. A flicker of frustration crossed his face as he watched her casual, almost reckless demeanor, her relaxed posture, her offhand remarks, her incredibly audacious tactics. She didn't even seem to understand what was at stake here. Every moment of the match was treated like a game, yet she kept winning. Unbelievable, Zalthara muttered under his breath, his clawed hands clenching around the edge of the table. This human is breaking the game. He activated a different holofile, bringing up footage of the ancient Zalorian texts on combat tradition. Thousands of years of strategy, every move calculated to perfection. Every warrior trained in the old ways, the way of strength, precision, and honor. He had followed these codes for his entire life. His soldiers did the same. This was the essence of Zalorian power, of their superiority. And now this human, this insignificant creature, was shattering it all with the most unpredictable and unconventional methods imaginable. Zalthara leaned closer to the hologram, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. There was no honor in Kalen's methods, no technique. She was defying everything he believed in. The pride of his race, the history of his people, it all hinged on their adherence to tradition, the honor of the fight. To win through intelligence rather than brute force, to outwit the enemy rather than overpower them. It was an insult to everything he stood for. He had witnessed the human's strange tactics before, but seeing them in action, truly seeing them, was something entirely different. Kalen's methods were alien to him, and that made her dangerous in ways he had not prepared for. She was not bound by tradition. She did not care for the sacred codes of battle. She was simply doing whatever worked. In his long life, Zalthara had always relied on the certainty of his strategies, the guarantee that the rules would be followed, that the best would always win. But Kalen wasn't interested in following the rules. She was interested in destroying the status quo. And as he watched the final moment of her last match, her unapologetic grin as she defeated yet another opponent in the most unexpected way, Zalthara felt a cold chill ripple through his spine. For the first time in centuries, he felt a growing unease. She was breaking the game, and Zalthara wasn't sure if he could stop her. This human isn't a threat because of her strength or her skills, he whispered, voice tinged with disbelief. She's a threat because she's rewriting the rules. The final rounds were drawing near, and the arena was packed to capacity. From all corners of the galaxy, spectators gathered to witness what was quickly becoming an unprecedented spectacle. Kalen had defied every expectation, and now, with each victory, the whispers and chatter grew louder. There was something unsettling about her, a human with no apparent training, no formal combat strategy, no respect for the traditions of galactic warfare. And yet, here she was, still standing. In the VIP section, high-ranking officials from countless factions exchanged wary glances. Zalorian generals, renowned for their calculating minds, watched her matches with growing frustration. Tkor warlords who had once scoffed at the idea of a human competing were now gritting their teeth in disbelief. Even Zarkar, who had been soundly defeated by her, sat in the shadows, his face flickering with residual frustration. And yet, it wasn't just the officials and combatants that were taking notice. The betting markets had gone wild. Odds, once so firmly stacked against Kalen, were now fluctuating in chaotic patterns. A message blinked across the galactic feeds. Error does not compute. As the line hovered on screens across the galaxy, audience members gasped, unsure whether it was a glitch or a legitimate warning. A human with no formal combat background, muttered a nervous Zalorian merchant, watching Kalen's unpredictable movements on a large display. How is this possible? The spectators, alien and human alike, couldn't make sense of what they were witnessing. Some had hoped her initial wins were mere flukes, but with each new opponent she dismantled with ease, that hope seemed more and more absurd. Kalen wasn't just winning, she was humiliating these warriors, and in a way that stung far more than any defeat. She doesn't play by any of our rules, one of the Zalorian generals muttered, his voice edged with growing unease. She doesn't even seem to care. She's throwing everything we've known about combat out the window. The humans have no honor, came the haughty response from an elder corps who had been monitoring Kalen's progress from the arena's elevated seats. But they are clever. Too clever. Kalen didn't respond to the growing murmurs of disapproval. She simply moved with a relaxed confidence that felt almost disrespectful. Even now, standing in the wings as the final match loomed ahead, she made no grand gesture, no last-minute training ritual. She adjusted her armored gloves nonchalantly, checking her equipment as if preparing for a daily workout, not the greatest challenge of her life. Her humor, as always, was unbroken. "Anyone know where I can find a snack?" she asked out loud to no one in particular, causing a few nearby alien competitors to freeze, confused by her calm demeanor. "She's making a mockery of everything," an elder Zalorian growled, his fingers twitching toward the controls for the arena's security. "She doesn't understand the consequences of what she's doing." The tension was palpable. Kalen was close to the finals, and with every step she took, the stakes climbed higher. The crowd, no longer just spectators, had become part of the spectacle, caught in a strange mixture of awe and confusion. Kalen's apparent disregard for tradition had thrown the entire competition into disarray, and it was impossible to deny the power of her approach. But her biggest challenge was still ahead. Zalthara himself, the undefeated commander, his reputation stretched across galaxies. For centuries, no one had dared challenge his authority on the battlefield. No one had dared question the methods of the Zalorian people. Kalen was about to face the embodiment of everything she had disrupted with her wild, unpredictable tactics. Her enemies were no longer simply combatants. They were an entire system of power, culture, and tradition, and she had become the chaos threatening to tear it all apart. As the final match approached, Kalen stood at the edge of the arena, waiting for her opponent to make his entrance. The air buzzed with tension. Every spectator's eyes glued to the holographic screens displaying the coming clash. "Let's see what happens when tradition meets unpredictability," Kalen muttered to herself, her voice barely above a whisper, but it felt like a challenge that echoed across the entire arena. In the stands, the whispers intensified. The stakes were no longer about who would win. They were about who would survive the consequences of this unprecedented battle. The final confrontation was no longer just a fight for victory. It had become a battle for the future of galactic combat itself. The arena was electric, the tension palpable in every corner of the grand structure. The galaxy's eyes were upon them. On one side stood Kalen, humanity's unpredictable force, unyielding, determined, and calm as ever. On the other side, the Zalorian commander, Zalthara, the embodiment of centuries-old tradition and precision. Today was not just a battle for victory. It was a clash of worlds, one built on chaos, the other on absolute order. The air hummed with anticipation. The spectators so silent you could hear the electric hum of the force fields that separated the two combatants. Kalen stood with her hands loosely by her sides, her posture casual. She was almost relaxed, as though she was ready for a friendly spar rather than a life-or-death duel. Her body still bore the faint scars of the poison, the alien toxin that had nearly claimed her life. But now, she was stronger than ever, driven by the fury of her revenge and the sheer force of human adaptability. Across from her, Zalthara was all business. His towering figure was a monument to Zalorian discipline. His scales shimmered with a soft glow, reflecting centuries of tradition and precision. His eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of something unfamiliar. Doubt. This human, this unpredictable force of nature, had already shaken him to his core. He had studied her every move, expecting the rules of combat to reveal themselves, but she defied every rule he had ever known. A booming voice echoed to the arena. "The final battle begins now." Kalen didn't flinch. She took a slow, deliberate step forward, glaring at Zalthara. "So," she called out with a grin that didn't match the situation, "ready to lose to a human?" Zalthara's eyes narrowed, his body poised for the first strike. "You will regret underestimating me, human," he growled, his voice a low rumble. Without warning, Zalthara launched himself forward, a blur of speed and precision. His claws extended, and with a primal roar, he aimed for her throat. But Kalen, ever the wild card, was ready. With a grin, She stepped aside, almost lazily, and let the attack miss by mere inches. "Whoa! That was a close one," she muttered, her voice too casual for such a dangerous move. Zaltharah's jaw clenched. This wasn't the human he expected. She wasn't following the combat styles of any of the thousands of species he had encountered in his long career. Her tactics were utterly random and yet effective. Kalen took the moment to distract him, reaching into her pocket and pulling out something unexpected, a small laser pointer. She clicked it on, and the red that darted across Zaltharah's chest. His eyes darted around, confused by the tiny distraction. "What's this?" he roared, his movements faltering as the red moved erratically. "A little something from Earth," Kalen said with a grin, still moving fluidly despite Zaltharah's mounting aggression. "Keeps you on your toes." Furious, Zaltharah launched a series of rapid energy strikes, but Kalen was always one step ahead. She dodged, weaved, and countered with moves so unpredictable, it seemed like the rules of physics didn't apply to her. She wasn't following Zalorian tradition. She was rewriting the entire idea of combat itself. As Zaltharah prepared for his next move, Kalen suddenly grabbed a nearby metal shard, not as a weapon, but as a distraction. She threw it straight into the air, and as it flew high above them, she used it as a cover to slide in close. In a blink, she was right behind him. She tapped him on the shoulder. "Tag, Urit," she said, her voice full of mischief. For the briefest moment, Zaltharah faltered, utterly thrown off by the human's audacity. He spun, launching a series of energy blasts in her direction. But Kalen simply laughed, the sound echoing through the arena as she dodged each attack with ease. Zaltharah was growing increasingly frustrated. His methods were precise, honed by centuries of training, but Kalen wasn't fighting by any of his rules. She wasn't concerned with elegance or honor. She was concerned only with winning at any cost. With one final roar, Zaltharah charged. His body surged forward with all the might of a Zalorian warrior, and his claws gleamed with lethal intent. But Kalen, ever the tactician, had already calculated her next move. As he closed in, Kalen spun, grabbed a nearby rock, and threw it directly to the ground beneath his feet. The force of her throw created a small shockwave, causing the ground to crack and buckle. Zaltharah, unprepared, stumbled forward, right into Kalen's path. With a quick, almost nonchalant movement, Kalen reached out, grabbing him by the arm and flipping him to ground with a move that defied Zalorian physics. The arena fell silent. Zaltharah lay on the ground, stunned and breathing heavily. For the first time, his scales flickered with fear. He had underestimated this human, and now he had lost. Kalen stood over him, her foot on his chest, breathing lightly as if she had just finished a jog. She looked down at the defeated warrior, her smile broad and triumphant. "Looks like you're the one who didn't play by the rules this time, Zaltharah." The crowd erupted into cheers, half in disbelief, half in awe, while Kalen stood there, victorious. The traditions of the past, the rigid rules, and the precision of the Zalorian combat style had been completely undone by unpredictability, humor, and human ingenuity. As the arena's lights flashed, Kalen raised her arms in triumph, the weight of the battle sinking in. The battle was over, but the war for tradition and change had only just begun. The arena was alive with the roars of victory and disbelief, but Kalen stood motionless in the center of it all, her expression calm. Zaltharah, the mighty Zalorian commander, lay defeated at her feet, his once pristine armor scratched and cracked from the battle. He had fought with all the strength of centuries of tradition, but in the end, it was human unpredictability that had shattered his pride and his combat style. As the alien crowds continued their cheers, Kalen looked around at the towering figures of various species. Beings of every shape, size, and color, all with eyes now turned toward her. They had watched as she, the human who should never have stood a chance, defied their expectations and rewrote the rules. The implications of her victory were undeniable. For generations, the galaxy had adhered to the ways of tradition, following rigid combat methods passed down through the ages. The Zalorians believed in precision, the Garthians in tactics, and the Esthrians in martial philosophy. Yet Kalen, a human with no grand lineage, no centuries of practice, had shown them all that there was more than one way to win, and that sometimes The greatest strength lies in adaptability, spontaneity, and a refusal to be bound by the rules. Zaltharos slowly rose from the ground, his pride clearly bruised. He had fought for honor and tradition, and in his eyes, humans were supposed to be a fluke, a species with no place in galactic combat. Yet here she was, the first human to ever challenge his authority, and she had done so with a smile on her face and a laugh on her lips. As the crowd quieted, Zaltharos' gaze met Kalen's. There was a shift in his demeanor, an almost reluctant respect. He opened his mouth, perhaps to speak, but instead, he simply nodded, an acknowledgement that the game had changed. "You didn't fight like us, human," he said, his voice low, but his words carrying a weight of realization. "You fought like you, something we never accounted for." Kalen, wiping the sweat from her brow, shot him a grin. "Exactly, Zalthara. The universe isn't one size fits all. We humans like to break things." Her words resonated far beyond the arena, echoing through the galaxy like a call to arms for those who had long been shackled by tradition. The old ways were no longer the only way forward. Kalen's victory wasn't just about her own triumph over the Zalorian commander. It was about everything she had represented, a shift in mindset, a shift away from rigidity and into the realm of possibility, where rules were no longer walls, but simply guidelines to be bent, broken, and redefined. As the Galactic Council arrived to announce her victory, they did not speak of her strength alone, nor her battle prowess. Instead, they spoke of the revolution she had sparked. The Council's leader, a towering Neverick from the SH Cal system, addressed the crowd. "This victory," he began, his voice booming, "is not just for the humans, but for every species that dares to challenge the status quo. Kalen's win is proof that when we think beyond our limitations, we discover new paths to greatness." Kalen's heart raced as she absorbed his words, but her mind was already drifting, her thoughts wrapping around the possibility that this was just the beginning. It wasn't just about one battle won. It was about the entire galaxy being forced to reconsider what they believed was possible. What if everyone could challenge their traditional ways, their ancient doctrines? Kalen glanced back at Zalthara. A small smile tugged at her lips as she approached him. "You're not so bad for an alien." She winked, and for the first time in the entire battle, Zalthara didn't respond with an arrogant sneer. Instead, he simply nodded, his scales flickering with the faintest hint of amusement. The galaxy would never be the same. Kalen's victory wasn't just about defeating an alien. It was about shattering the concept of limits, about proving that evolution didn't have to follow a prescribed path. With every human quirk, with every unpredictable move, she had shown the universe that flexibility and innovation were just as powerful as centuries of tradition. The final words of the announcer echoed, sealing her place in history. Kalen, the first human to ascend beyond the limitations of her species, the warrior who redefined victory.